currently live in a world in which the popular media is dominated by reboots, sequels, reimagines, and of course, franchises. The top 5 blockbuster movies to come out in the last year were Disney live-action remakes, sequels, and of course, Marvel movies. In fact, franchises have been so successful that studios are trying to revive dead ones. There were attempts last summer to bring back both Men in Black and Shaft. Franchises which don't really matter to anyone anymore, mostly because they haven't been in the cultural consciousness for the last 10 years. There isn't any new content coming out for those franchises. There aren't new films, TV shows, cartoons, or even comics. James Bond and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are constantly putting out content. So when relaunches and reboots of those franchises happen, there's interest. There's an active fan base interested in that relaunch. One of my favorite franchises to get a relaunch is Saint Seiya. And, I hate it. So, let's talk about Saint Seiya. Saint Seiya was a manga and anime series that started in 1986. The series was created by Masami Kurumada, and it follows a boy named Seiya who becomes a saint of Athena and must help her and his fellow saints protect the world. The anime came to America in 2003 after it saw huge success in Brazil and France. It is apparently the second most popular anime series in Brazil after Dragon Ball and its related titles. The English language version of the manga was done by Viz Media. The English dub of the anime, Knights of the Zodiac, was done by DIC Entertainment. DIC was the same company that did the original dub of Sailor Moon. So, obviously, the Saint Seiya dub had some edits to make sure it was safe for young American audiences. The target demographic for anime dubs in America is often very young children, which meant that a series could undergo a lot of edits before it was considered suitable. There are fewer edits in Knights of the Zodiac than, say, the 4Kids dub of Yu-Gi-Oh!, mostly because Knights of the Zodiac is targeting a slightly older demographic than most North American Yu-Gi-Oh! Audiences. I'm underqualified to talk about the specific edits that happened between the original Japanese Saint Seiya and the English Knights of the Zodiac, mostly because I haven't seen the DIC version of Knights of the Zodiac since I was about 13, and I'm not here to critique the original English dub. I'm here to talk about the Netflix adaptation of Saint Seiya. Over the last few years, Netflix has gotten into creating its own content. Even more recently, they've jumped at the chance to create their own reboots of popular media franchises, including things like Godzilla, Ultraman, and of course, Saint Seiya. I've watched the first version of this new Saint Seiya, and honestly, I wasn't impressed. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever watched, but it did have some issues that I can't get over. I don't want to sound like I'm angry that they changed something I love. Changes have been happening to Saint Seiya for decades. The original anime made changes from the manga, and it's full of new storylines and even characters. There have been sequels, spin-offs, and movies. Each of these things adds to or even changes the core lore of the franchise. Honestly, some of the changes in the Netflix version don't bother me at all. The fact that the boys aren't all orphans raised together and sent off to become saints isn't bad, and the fact that Shayna isn't wearing a mask implying there aren't any weird prohibitions against women becoming saints is also pretty cool. I mean, it does raise the question about why Marin is wearing a mask at all, but you could work that out in a good story. That being said, I just found this new series to be kind of lackluster and boring. It really only appealed to me because I was already familiar with the franchise and loved the idea of a modern take on the core story, instead of just getting allusions to it in a spin-off series like a Santia show. I even really enjoyed how the first episode started. That's kind of where my enjoyment of the series tapers off, though, The worst part of the series, in my opinion, is the pacing. Regardless of how well or not the changes were executed, the pacing is going to be the most off-putting thing to potential new fans. The first season of Knights of the Zodiac, Saint Seiya, covers a story that, in the original manga, takes about 30 chapters. That is a lot of content that the show unceremoniously crams into 6 episodes. That's a lot of ground to cover in not a lot of time. Plot points get rushed through or glossed over, and there's a lot of extra stuff. The showrunners made a lot of changes to the original content, which gets better explanations than the actual core lore of the series. What that means is that there's a lot of really boring exposition dumps, while at the same time the show speeds through the story as quickly as possible. There is also a major change that made me, and pretty much everyone who watched the show, very upset. I mean, everybody who's familiar with the original, at least. This is about the decision to make Andromeda Shun a girl. Shun was my favorite character as a kid. I absolutely loved him, and honestly, I still really love him. Shun and his big brother Ikki, like all of the other boys in the series, were forced to go train to become saints. Shun is separated from Ikki, and he hopes that by finishing his training and taking a cloth back to Japan, he can be reunited with his brother. And if that was all that mattered about his character, I'd be fine with them doing a gender switch. That's probably the least important thing about Shun's character, though. What I think are the most important things about Shun's character are his kindness and the fact that he's a pacifist. He hates the idea of hurting people. Later in the series, when he's given the choice to either fight or trade his life for Hyoga's, he decides to give his life for Hyoga. He values the life of his friend more than fighting, no matter how just the cause he's fighting for is. At some point, it is revealed that Shun is the strongest of the Bronze Saints. He has a power that rivals even the Gold Saints, and he regularly chooses not to use it. He hates the idea of hurting people so much that, despite all of his power, he doesn't want to use it, even against his enemies, even if it means he'll lose. He tries his hardest to find other ways to win and is nice to literally everyone. He's not happy with the things he's had to live through, but that's not going to stop him from helping people, even if they did terrible things to him in the past. He can't just abandon someone when he has the power to help them. He's still determined to find and help his brother, but he won't let that stop him from helping as many people along the way as possible. I think having a character like Shun is important, especially in a show about dudes beating the shit out of each other, in a world full of shows about dudes beating the shit out of each other. He's a positive role model that can show young boys they don't have to be testosterone-filled adrenaline addicts to be successful in life. Choosing not to use violence to solve your problems and being kind to others are just as valid ways to live your life. I love that. That's a powerful message, and by making Shun a girl, I feel like that message is being taken away from us. Of course the girl is nice. She's a girl. Of course she's a pacifist. She's a girl. Of course she's all of these things because she's a woman, and women are stereotypically gentle caregivers. If anyone was going to be a woman in the remake, it should have been Hyoga. Hear me out. In an action series like this, the girl is either the nice, gentle creature that needs protecting, or has given up all of her feelings and emotions to be a source of concentrated badassery. Like Black Widow in the Avengers movies. In order to be a stronger woman, she had to give up things like being kind and gentle. So, Hyoga joins the cast as a cold-hearted bastard who learns to care about the other characters and form meaningful relationships. If Hyoga were a girl, he could start as that can of whoop-ass that women in action shows are supposed to be in order to be successful. Then she could learn to care about the other saints, learn that having feelings isn't actually a hindrance, and that bonding and having relationships with those closest to you can actually make you stronger. That would actually be a subversion of the tropes typical to the genre. That would send a meaningful message to the audience, and it would be just as important as Andromeda Shun being a kind man who is opposed to violence in a world full of tough dude bros ready to throw down. It would matter. It would mean something, and we were robbed. Also, let me clarify. I'm not mad that they made changes to the source material. I just think they made bad changes. There's a lot going on with the original Saint Seiya manga that I don't like. The art is kind of stiff, it's pretty sexist, and there's a lot of not-so-casual racism. For example, Chameleon June. According to the character notes in the back of the manga, she's supposed to be from Ethiopia. Chameleon June. This woman with blonde hair and some of the palest skin in the series is supposed to be from Ethiopia. If Netflix had chosen to make changes to her character, it might have had positive effects on the story. The design team could have changed her appearance so that she looked like she was, actually from Ethiopia, or, they could have at least changed where she was from. Racism against Japanese people comes up a lot in both the original manga and the anime. So maybe making all of the people associated with Sanctuary 100% Greek would be a way to introduce that as a conflict. If Seiya and company were still Japanese, we could see them struggle to find a place amongst Sanctuary and the other saints. A society that is super closed off and has a hard time accepting outsiders regardless of how qualified they are. Between all of the changes that I would like to happen and have already happened, I hope that Hyuga is still mixed race. In the original, Hyuga is half Russian and half Japanese. This ends up causing him a lot of strife. The people from Sanctuary don't respect him because he's half Japanese. The other orphans he grew up with make fun of him because he's half Russian. He struggles to fit in because he's too much of one thing or the other for the people he's interacting with. He doesn't really belong anywhere until he starts getting close to Seiya and the others. They accept and care about him in a way he's never really experienced before. I am also mixed race, and I have to say it's really nice to see characters like Hyuga. It's really disheartening to be rejected from groups and communities because you're too much of something they don't like. So seeing a character like Hyuga struggle with the same thing, but in the end find a group of people that really truly care about him is super meaningful to people like me, even as an adult. After watching the new Netflix series, I started reacquainting myself with the original series. I read through the Sanctuary arc of the manga and binged all of the original episodes Netflix had as soon as they put them up. It was really nice to get back into something I loved so much as a kid, and at the same time I got reacquainted with Hyuga's backstory, and it really hit home. Maybe now more than when I was a kid. As an adult, I understand his struggles so much more than I used to. I've lived longer, and I know more about the world now than I did when I was young, and I really hope that they don't change his story. The last major sticking point I have with this adaptation is the story. In the source material, a dictator has taken over Sanctuary. He's determined to destroy Seiya and Saori, the current incarnation of Athena. He's using all of his power for nefarious purposes, and if he gets his way, it could be the reason the world ends. So he has to be stopped, and the system he's created has to be taken down. In the new show, it seems like that might still be a thing, but the primary villain of the first season is actually an evil scientist. I'm not kidding. A man has used technology to replicate the power of the saints' cloths and is going to use that power to take over the world. Or something. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what his purpose is. When he got introduced, they also threw a lot of other information at you. Like the fact that Seiya is apparently the chosen one. Listen, I love the idea of a bunch of guys fighting a corrupt system because it has done terrible things and needs to be taken down so that good can prevail. This has the potential to be a really powerful story, especially in the world we live in where we're kind of surrounded by systems that seem to actively be trying to bring us down. If any of us could put on a magic suit of armor and punch the people responsible for those systems in the face, we probably would. That's honestly why this series has stuck with me for as long as it has. I get to watch a bunch of guys fight against an oppressive system and a dictator and win. Sure, eventually they go and fight gods. And I mean, if punching a god in the face doesn't make you feel powerful, I don't know what will. But they still start with a simple goal, and that's pretty easy to relate to. It's meaningful and invests you in their story. I care about these characters and the things they've accomplished. I want to watch them punch gods in the face. focusing on them fighting a generic supervillain is kind of boring. Of course they're gonna beat him, he's a supervillain, and they're the good guys. Focusing on the supervillain also takes away from the actual conflict of the show. Let's remember, season 1 is only 6 episodes, and that's not a lot of time to give the characters any sort of complexity while focusing on 2 very distinct conflicts. It just adds to the overall pacing problem the show has. There is far too much going on, and not enough time to cover it. In order to get through all of the plot points, things go by lightning fast. Hyuga, for example, is originally ordered to kill Seiya and the others for betraying Sanctuary, and he shows up at their tournament to do just that. Except then he doesn't. He gets there, tries to kill Athena, and then changes his mind. Because reasons, I guess. And then he decides to fight in the tournament. Because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and is really just aggravating. I'm also not a big fan of Seiya being the chosen one. According to the lore in this version, the Pegasus is needed for Athena to win the upcoming War of the Gods because he has wings, I guess. One of the things that makes Seiya so great is that he isn't some kind of chosen hero. He's just a boy that wants to find his long-lost sister. He trains to become strong enough to find her and take on anything in his way. As the series progresses, he learns to overcome his own internal barriers and access the power within himself that will lead to his victory. It isn't his destiny. He's just a normal boy who made himself great out of sheer determination. Seiya's power comes not from his training, but from his cosmos. This series' version of the Force. No amount of training will make your cosmos stronger. You connect with it and make it flare. Something that you can do only by reaching deep within yourself and overcoming any sort of mental hang-ups you might have. Tying all of Seiya's accomplishments to his destiny instead of his determination cheapens his character. The series does have plenty of other characters with predetermined destinies that they either fight against or just straight up lean into. Seiya is his own person, though, and determined to succeed based on his own power. He's more interesting than your typical chosen one, and making all of his actions tied to his destiny robs him of a lot of depth. Not that any of the characters in this version have a whole lot of depth. They're all pretty shallow and one note. Again, because there's not a lot of time to develop them. It always comes back to the pacing. It just doesn't work. I probably could have loved all the changes they made if they'd taken the time to develop them into full-fledged ideas. If they'd developed all of those changes over time and carefully worked them into the existing lore, this series might have actually been good. I mean, it would have at least been decent. It might not have been so aggravating to existing fans and more welcoming to newcomers. It doesn't feel like a lot of care went into this adaptation. It doesn't feel like the showrunners cared all that much about the source material they were adapting. I'm not sure how you make money off of a Netflix show, but this feels like a cash grab. It doesn't feel like a lot of care went into this adaptation. It actually doesn't feel like the showrunners cared all that much about the source material they were adapting. I'm not sure how you make money off of a Netflix show, but this feels like a cash grab. You know, like one of those film adaptations of a novel that changes so much about the story that it should have used a different name. Films like that won't change the name, though, because they want the novel's existing fan base as a guaranteed source of income. Those hardcore fans will absolutely go see the movie when it's released. Even if they end up hating it, they already paid to see it. This adaptation of Saint Seiya feels a lot like that. Saint Seiya is an absolute hit in Latin America, and content for the franchise is regularly released, sustaining interest in the series. There's a bunch of people who care about Saint Seiya and who probably watched the Netflix series the second it dropped. This guaranteed views for the first season, even if it didn't really deserve them. In the end, I'm not going to fault a creative team for making changes to the source material they're adapting. The problem is when those changes don't work and feel more like they're there for the sake of changing things instead of adding anything meaningful to the story. Those changes will definitely feel arbitrary and unnecessary if you rush through all of the major plot points at lightning speed. The advantage to telling a story in series format is that you have time to add in the things you want in a natural and enjoyable way. I know that Netflix likes to end their original shows after 2 seasons, so it's tempting to cram as much as possible into what little space there is. But that just doesn't make for a good story. It just creates a jumbled and rushed mess that upsets the fan base you're trying to tap into. A fan base that has people like me who will spend weeks complaining about it to their friends and then write an 8-page essay detailing why they're frustrated. Alright, that last one might be unique to just me, but that doesn't change the fact that you're not putting out a quality product. Sure, we want to have a good time when we're watching something. It's got to be fun and exciting, but you can't just throw things at your audience and expect to make an impact. I mean, look at the Transformers movies. They make a crap ton of money, and I have seen literally all of them. But I don't remember anything that happened in any of them. The only thing I can tell you with any confidence is that the one with the dinosaurs is far too long. I don't remember what took up all of that screen time, but I do remember sitting there and begging for the credits to roll long before they actually did. That's not a good thing. Having a good story or characters makes me engage with whatever media I'm consuming. It makes it matter. I'll remember it and want more. I'll talk to people about all of the cool stuff that happened. I'll recommend that show, book, movie, whatever, because I want other people to love it just as much as I do. I honestly don't recommend the Netflix Saint Seiya. If you're completely unfamiliar with the source material, then the changes really aren't going to matter to you. If that were the only problem, you might actually be able to enjoy the show. Except the problem that keeps coming to bite the show in the ass is its pacing. Everything's far too rushed, and there's not enough time to care about anything that's going on, and that makes it really boring. I'm not interested in what happens next, because I don't care about the characters or the story, which is a real shame.